Ahojte druháci, pozdravujem vás znovu z ďalšej nahratej hodiny. Ja mám nedeľu, keď vám toto už video dopredu nahrávam, vy máte buď útorok alebo štvrtok, podľa toho, aká ste trieda. Budeme pokračovať v téme, ktorú máme, a to sú teda Rímania. Minulú hodinu sme teda začali, prebehli sme si Rímske kráľovstvo a republiku, dnes budeme hovoriť o kríze, tzv. Kríze Rímskej republiky a vzniku cisárstva. Uvidíme, pokiaľ sa nám podarí zájsť. Nezabudnite, že máte teda odpovedať pod linkom na otázku, ktorá je niekde v tom zadaní, v tom statuse. No, možno som teraz v horúčkach alebo v nejakých bolestiach z tých 8 písmenových smrteľných chorôb pre mužov, ale budem po očkovaní, tak preto vám aj toto nahrávam. No a budem vám na to reagovať, takže nezabudnite samozrejme na čas komentovať, odpovedať na otázky. Dobre, sám ešte neviem teraz v tejto chvíli, ale určite nejaké budú, takže aj možno to hypodrome, canis drome, canis je pes po latinsky. Dobre, OK, takže na čo čakáme, poďme ďalej pokračovať. Budem samozrejme si preklikávať čas na nahrávanie. No a my sme skončili niekde tu pri Roman Republic v tejto časti. Okay, I was talking about how Roman Republic, Res Publica, their own system of kind of like elected government and division of power between these two citizens groups, the poor plebeians and rich patricians, the senate and consuls and dictators, that you have to analyze in your assignment. Then you have to analyze a couple of short parts about wars from the period of Roman Republic. I told you that they had some wars within the Apennine Peninsula, and if we come back to the previous slides, that in the north there were Celts and in the south there were Greeks. So in Sicily there was also a nation that we called Phoenicians. Romans called them Puns, and we know them as Carthaginians according to their big important town that is in the kind of reconstruction pictures. Today it's capital of Tunisia called Tunis, of course, and still you cannot see, but I can see in this spot typical round port, very interesting fortification of this Carthage. Actually, most of English speakers call this town Carthage, that I really don't like, so I prefer Carthage or Carthago, that is like common, like their Punic Phoenician name. It was very important business power in Mediterranean, and just like Romans, they also tried to expand it, especially in the islands of, I will need this map, in the islands of this Western Mediterranean, and they tried to expand it. In the times when Romans clashed and finally defeated this Greek city-states, so they start attacking also Greek city-states in the Sicily, like Syracuse, with a legendary defense led by, not led, but also held by some machines made by Archimedes himself. Here, half of the Sicily was occupied by these Carthaginians, who felt self-confident enough because at the time they ruled in these very moderate and fertile regions along the coast. And also they expanded in what later Romans called Hispania. At the time they mostly call it Iberia, according to Celtic Gallic tribes of Ibers or Iberians or Lusitanians in Portugal. As I said, they were Celts, but there were many other various nations in very ancient Basques. And actually, these Carthaginians, they didn't mind it very much. As I said, they were Phoenicians, but there were a lot of Greeks living around. There were these barbarian and Arabic nations living in here, Celts and Gels. So as you see from this book, Otové války sveta 1, sorry. So even this Carthaginian army was mixture of various styles from African to Greek style or Gallic style, even having these elephants in the army with towers and so on. What happened that Romans of course start to fight for the Sicily, because if you remember, it provided enough food for all the territories of Apennine Peninsula, and of course they start to fight with Phoenicians. They led gradually 3 wars within more than 100 years, almost more than 100 years, between the 3rd and 1st century, like 146, I think the Carthage was finally eventually destroyed. Yeah, short war, wasn't it? Yeah, it was not. Actually, they had many conflicts in the seas and in the lands, and there were three famous military leaders, commanders of Carthage. That was actually kind of oligarchy combined with democracy. That was interesting. They had kind of like elected council and these strategos, military rulers, so it reminded more like Greek type of states. Actually, one of them was Hamilcar Barca or Hamilcar Barcas, and he was really cool, combining these African forces, Celtic forces, and Hellenistic Greek phalangas. And Romans couldn't defeat them. Like Carthage was really strong, it was really powerful. So what they tried to use, and they were using very often, they used diplomacy, but also kind of like scaring and plots, coup d'etats, and assassinations. And Hamilcar Barcas actually lost his power, and while he was dying, he asked to call his son Hannibal. And Hannibal, his son, had to promise his father that he will bring revenge and destroy Rome. So Hannibal dedicated, as new commander of Carthage, dedicated all his efforts to defeat Romans. But because during this first Punic War they lost Sicily, and Romans actually claimed and gathered almost all the navy that Phoenicians had, so it was no chance to challenge Romans in the seas. And Romans were actually taking over, taking over this navy from Greeks and even improving it, upgrading various things. You'll see some ships definitely. So his tactics was in invasion of Hispania, it was much easier to get here, and occupying some especially silver mines. From these silver and gold and other metals, they could raise even bigger armies that were big enough to cross the Pyrenees, enter what was at the time Gallia, the land of Celtic tribes, generally called by Romans Gauls, Gallia. Here, actually defeating them and forcing them to march with them and crossing the Alps. These very famous stories that he had like about up to 40 elephants in his armies, and they're crossing mountain passes that were about like 3,000 meters high. It was snowing. Some elephants actually died, but most of them they managed to come down to Italy, and you can hear a huge army, big enough that it easily destroyed Roman forces 3 times, and they marched to Rome. Rome already at that time was big enough that even huge Phoenician army had no chance to besiege it all. And it was easy for Romans to open some gate and get out with some legions and come back with enough food. And even the other more important thing was that Hannibal was not able to interrupt their road to Ostia, that is Roman port, Roman harbor. In this way, Romans could like bring enough food. So for 1 or 3 years, Hannibal dwelled around next to the Rome called Hannibal ante portas, Hannibal in front of the gates, Hannibal at the gates. And he's spending here in northern Italy occupying it and trying to force Romans to negotiate. But Romans realized during this long period that actually, okay, we cannot defeat him, but we can still get on the ships, and we can attack Carthage that is defenseless without their armies and with civilians, with their families. So this is what Romans did, that they attacking Carthago from the sea. Hannibal had to come back, and they clashed in the Battle of Zama, where Hannibal was actually defeated. Finally, he died with natural death, and there was the last one, Hasdrubal, that is the most famous name for the king or ruler, the steward of, not Gondor, but steward of Carthage. And one of these last Hasdrubals was the one that he led last defense against last invasion of Romans, because still Romans were not satisfied that Carthage is still alive. So Scipio Africanus, one of the consuls and dictators of Rome, promised that he shall destroy Carthage for once and forever, and actually bring Hispania and Africa under the Roman rule. In this way, Romans managed to defeat Punic armies in like 146 BC, and they destroyed Carthage, pulled down its fortifications. Symbolically, they spread it, poured some salt on it, so it was symbolic way that nothing can grow when you salt something on it. So in this way, only the city of Tunisia with interesting excavations remain. But what was important thing, and why I was telling a lot of this stuff, Hannibal was really popular thanks that one of the greatest enemies of Romans that later became, how to say, stubborn and too popular and too self-confident. So in this way, still Carthage was destroyed, and Romans actually got outside in this Roman Republic, got outside of the borders of Italia with conquest of the Sicily, Sardinia, and Corsica. That was one thing, but they actually added these territories of northern Africa, now called the province Africa, and Cilicia and Numidia, as new parts of Roman, not empire, but still like territories of Roman Republic. The other was Hispania, and because Hispania provided very good, like a nice climate for Romans, similar to Italia, so they started with settling in here. And ruling these large territories, Romans actually turned out to be more like emperor, like empire. Still, we don't call it empire, still it is republic. Okay, there is a ship, you cannot see it, but I can see it when I turn over. Romans, for example, added some ballistas in here, so some shooting machines taken over from Greeks, or for example, this shooting tower, sometimes ladder that you will see was also added like a falling bridge on the other ship. Okay, still, these growing territories didn't bring anything to common Romans that were fighting in the armies and defeating their enemies, because most of the land in Hispania and in Sicily was taken over by patricians who settled there and who only get more and more slaves and had it and just use it, exploited it. But plebeians were angry about this, so they start to claim in this tribune of the people that they want to share like more power and they want to have something from this expansion of Rome, because they die and maybe they are paid something, but they wanted more for these claims that even plebeians, because they are citizens, so even these new lands should be divided among them too, not only among plebeians. So many of the tribunes of the people claim it, among them two famous brothers, Tiberius and Gaius Gracchus, in plural form of Latin language, it's called the Gracchi, čiže bratia Grachovci, Tiberius and Gaius Gracchus, and both of them actually represented these plebeian demands. Both of them, of course, were like enemies for patricians, and how to respond to poor people claiming more power or more share from the profit is that one was killed, one was actually both of them were assassinated. One was, I think, poisoned, the other was stabbed by a dagger. I can't remember exactly, but the thing was that they became great heroes for this poor population, and later for various ideologies, even 20th century communists, they really adored them, that these guys were leading uprising of the poor. But the thing was that really they had to turn they have to give something to plebeians. Another problems were when just between these Punic Wars and during the times of Gracchi brothers, there were 2 or 3 or 4 consuls that were given dictatorship, because another conflicts appeared. We call them 3 Servial Wars. Doslova, že 3 vojny servilov, servilus and servilum, znamená, it means slave. Actually, 2 of them were really slave wars, po slovensky nazveme, že vojny otrokov alebo povstania otrokov. Obidve boli na Sicílii, takže preto my hovoríme o 2 sicílskych vojnách otrokov. A k tomu ešte oddelujeme ďalšiu vojnu, that's Gladiator War, čiže Spartakovo povstanie. Čiže my máme 2 povstania, sicilské povstanie otrokov a vojnu Spartakovo povstanie, zatiaľ čo Angličania, Američania hovoria o 3 Servile Wars together, 2 slave uprisings and 1 gladiator uprising. I should explain what does it mean, and it was also respond to this thing, because many people were dissatisfied. What happened, guys? As I told you, there were many slaves in Sicily, and they realized that complete even like food production of Rome is dependent on theirs labor. So of course sometimes it happened that the conditions were so bad that they start to fight. Both of these Sicilian uprising of slaves were defeated easily, but a problem came with the third uprising, and that's why during these years of uprisings, Romans always elected consuls with dictatorship things. And these guys, they start to think that how to defeat, especially this gladiator war. It was not such like easy thing like with the Sicilian War, because even during these two, and especially during Spartacus uprising, what happened? That gladiators in the city of Capua, where there was big gladiator school, and gladiators were slave warriors who were trained in special schools to kill each other only for fun, for sports of Romans in arenas and colosseum of ancient Rome. Because they were great warriors, of course they were being protected, and as the only slaves, they were promised freedom. So in case like you were able to defeat your enemies in arena, you were the last standing, so before killing your enemy, you turn and you saw the patricians electing whether you should kill your opponent or let him live, with thumb up or thumb down. So this is also a gesture that is symbolical. Of course, before coming to arena, they counted that they shall die, and they call like greeting like morituri te salutant. The dying are greeting you. Those who are going to die are greeting you, and that was the symbolic that the only one survivor usually was given even freedom. But the point was that one of these guys, named Spartacus, from the at the time province next to Greece called Thrace. Today it's Bulgaria, but there were not Slavic people living at the time. And one of these Thracians, Spartacus, he organized big rebellion, and during which the gladiators uprised, they killed their masters, slave masters, and they organized big rebellion. This rebellion turned out to be really huge and big, and as I said, the gladiators were excellent skilled warriors, sometimes fighting the animals and so on. So they were really excellent fighters. So they just got weapons from this garrison, and they proclaimed they are going to fight for freedom of anybody who will join them. So in the names in here, Asiacus and Rodan and many other various names from nations from Celtic, Hispanic, Greek, whatever, Numidian, African origin start to fight. And now here in the statue, famous statue, what they do actually map is that a bit, so I have to move it in here if you don't mind, guys, so you can see it. I believe it will work. Give me a moment, please. Okay, this is still better than nothing. So in Capua they started this uprising, but when they start to fight, many people start to join them. Slaves, of course, it's logical. But even poor farmers and a lot of plebeians, even from bigger towns, start to join their forces because they're dissatisfied with the rule of patricians. So suddenly, that's why we talk about cries of republic, because this one rebellion of like some fires, and suddenly many of Roman citizens joined their forces. So he gathered a huge army that started to march. They didn't want to attack, didn't mean to attack Rome, but it was another danger. But what happened that there were various fractions in his armies. So they firstly decided to go to the north, cross the Alps, and just get home to Thrace, to Gallia, Germania, Pannonia, wherever they wanted. But near Mutina, they decided to go down to the south because they realized that Romans would probably follow them. So they actually were voting, and they voted, let's go down to the south, to Sicily, and organize a big uprising, another big uprising in Sicily again, because still there were like maybe even millions of slaves. I don't know the number, I'm sorry for that. But finally they marched down. Of course, Romans were not able to defeat them. That was another great heroic story. And they come to this region, with today it's the city of Tarento. And there is like very short town of Messina, sorry. And here in the city of Messina, that is on like 3 kilometers straight to Sicily. They needed like ships for like 70,000, 50,000 men. So they gathered some gold and loot they had from looting. And some guys, shipmasters, took the money and promised them to carry them, but they were pirates. They got the money. And sorry for that. They got the money, but but this. But they sailed away. They were just pirates. So suddenly they left here in Cantabria, in Calabria. Sorry for that again. In Calabria, and they decided to like what to do. They couldn't stay there, so they start to march back again, and somewhere in here they finally clashed. And as you can see, during 3 years, in final battle for them, Sulla, dictator Sulla, finally managed to defeat their armies. Only 5,000 gladiators survived, and of course, because it could be like precedence for anybody that let's fight Romans and it will be no problem. So this is from the movie Spartacus, or from the TV series. Now I'm not sure. The scene along the Via Appia, that was from Capua due to Rome, where there was the biggest rebellion. So along the road, they were excellent road builders. They built it crosses, crucifix in Latin, and they crucified 5,000 gladiators and participants of the rebellion. 5,000 crosses with dying people, because when they nail you to the cross, so you can die like for 3 days. So that was for warning for the others, but it was obvious that even when plebeians were joining these forces, that probably the system of republic was not very fair for everybody. What they did, and what these dictators realized, that even they need to have loyal army, and they need to make sure that plebeians wouldn't stand against them. So that's why one of them, Marius Sulla, what is he in here? Probably, sorry for that. Yeah, okay, I got some link. Probably it will be about some movie, but my pictures are, it's lost somewhere. Okay, it's up in here. So sorry for that. I will just put it back. Okay, this is one good one. Sorry. Again, so this was from the movie Spartacus. Actually, you can watch the TV series, but it's full of violence and especially nudity that I should not definitely should not promote, especially an HBO style. It's like really pointless in this way. And this movie is supposed to be one of the best historical movies of modern cinematography. That is from 1960, Spartacus Uprising, and they were one of the biggest scenes of military, and for that time it was really cool and even colored. Okay, so if you're really interested in watching some of these, of course, it's like 1960s, early 1960s, but they were most like according to real historical events. So sometimes it's good not to watch only like modern style, but sometimes browse it, and you may find in various forms like actually there are many movies about Spartacus, so that would be, and big military scenes. Okay, let it be. So many people there, and even for communists, it became like Spartacus became like great hero, fighter, warrior for the liberation from some oppressive regime, and that's why there were many Spartacist uprising. Was also German communist uprising in 1919, 1918 years, when some football clubs that had some workers class or communist or leftist origins, so they start to be called Spartak Trnava, Spartak Moscow, Spartak Sofia. So that was also similar, just like Sparta Prague, for example. Okay, but what I wanted to say and mention, that how Roman Republic started to be gradually changed, that how to provide enough satisfaction for these plebeians not to join these rebellions and uprising, was to build a professional army. And one of these dictators and guys, and already gladiators were defeated by these armies right now, were reforms of Gaius Marius. And this was the period when they organized typical Roman military army that allowed them to conquer like all Mediterranean half of Europe. What did he do? Firstly, he said that armies should not be only according to your duties and citizenship, but you should be paid for that. They called it pensium, pensia. That was also for from ancient Greece, and it was money that you were given for the service for the state. Because today many people just don't want to go for election. I mean, to be elected, because they would rather be teachers, okay, or for example work on a farm. And when you are sitting in the Senate in some Areopagus, so actually you cannot be in the field and you just don't feed your family. So they decided that these people in the service of the state should be paid, should be given premium and pension. Romans started to call it premia, and it was actually money. So they were mercenaries, but they're like professional soldiers. So they were giving salary to these guys. The other thing was that if you served in military for, let's say, 20 years, then you were given right for pensia, for pension. Pensia in Latin was actually named for the land that you can be given as a gift. Like you were fighting for Roman Republic for 20 years, so when you retired, when you become veteran, so you'll be given land in Hispania, in Africa, in Pannonia, in Anatolia, in one of the provinces. So usually these guys, veteran plebeians, suddenly had a great chance. Like when I enter military, it's not only that I will be well paid, yeah, at the same time, I shall protect patricians, of course, and republic. But at the same time, I can actually find a new fortune for me, new destiny. So he will be given big land, even enough pension to buy a lot of slaves. And very often in Gallia, finding himself some of the girls you have like blonde hair, blue eye, that was like they were really attractive for these dark haired Romans, so they start to settle in these lands, and it was so great for them that at the same time these veterans plebeians had chance to fight. They were very loyal to the republic. Then they were colonizing new lands and bringing Latin language and Roman culture to Hispania, to Gallia, and to these lands. And this is how they became what we talk about, what we call Romance people, Romanske národy. All of these are actually descendants of the settlers or from these military legionaries in here. So that's why I also gave you a couple of the words and things from dictionary of about military stuff, because they are of Romans, of these Gaius Marius reform of 107 before Christ BC. What happened? So pensions and premia. Generally, other things are with organization of Roman armies, just like legion or legia. Legia or legion was basic unit about like 5 to 6,000 men, and it was divided in cohorts and centuria. They were smaller units. Still, they had like exact number of men, and they had special banners that they were marching, and you could organize them in this way. As being professionals, being trained very well, being well organized, so Roman armies were almost undefeatable for many centuries. Among the things we already talk about is vexillum, for example. It's Roman banner or a flag that these guys centurions were holding with eagle as a sign of Jupiter, main god, tall bolt thrower, just like Zeus, with sometimes SPQR letters, you already know, Senatus et Populusque Romanus, lightnings or fasces, for example, that were all symbols of Jupiter and other gods, and of course, very often with some animals and legio, obviously 20, Roman numbers. If not, so definitely learn it. What else? These vexillums were dividing later these units of legion to cohorts and centuria, but this is the thing that even anybody who was member of legion, so he was fighting outside of their homeland, outside of Italy, outside of Italia, and that's why legionary later on became a synonym for the word soldier fighting abroad. So that's why French legions are armies fighting in Africa, for example. Czechoslovak legionaries during the First World War were Czech and Slovak soldiers fighting in broad armies for creation of Czechoslovakia. Today in football or ice hockey, legionaries are players who fight for the clubs abroad in foreign leagues. Okay, what else? Centuria is from the word centus, which in Latin means 100. So when you have 1 cent, it's one part of 100, because we could have like 60, cents in euro, but this is centuria, so 100 men. What else? They also had like auxiliary forces. You may know, like English learners, students of English, auxiliary verbs. And if you remember, what does it mean, auxiliary? Pomocné slovesa. In this way, auxilia or auxiliary forces were another forces of people or soldiers who were not Romans, didn't have Roman citizenship, were from other tribes subjected, oppressed by Romans, let's say these Gauls or Africans or Iberians. but they were doing not fighting, but they were, for example, building camps, military camps called castrums, building ditches for fortification. They were cooking, carrying heavy loads for them. Of course, most of legionaries, of basic soldiers, they had to carry this almost like a backpack with their shield and all these machines, but even like this kind of combination of shovel and pickaxe important for them. So they had to carry a lot of stuff with them too. So these like marching, hiking, legionary. So auxiliary forces were in here. How is possible that these other nations were willing to fight for Romans? It was easy because after serving like 15 years in auxiliary forces, you were allowed to enter also legions, and after 20 years, you were allowed uh, to fight in not to fight but to settle in Roman lands and actually given Roman citizenship. So this is something that also in France they had these French foreign legions, and if you serve there for like these 20 years, you are given French citizenship. So you see that it's an interesting connection in here, and how this Romanization went on. We'll come back to that later on. Ballista, you seen ballista in the ship. Actually, didn't see it because my face is still here, but uh, it was example of how Romans were capable of take over things that they they used to like and have, and this was actually Greek invention. In this way, they took over many of other military tactics they have, and combination of these experienced professional armies with building these castros, military camps, big cities. Actually, they protected this whole empire. Even in a moment, I will speak about Gallic Wars, building the great fortifications capable gave them chance to build Roman Empire as we know it, even including Limes Romanus that I already mentioned, and maybe you will see some pictures, I believe so, which was actually a huge fortification along the Danube, especially, and protecting Roman Empire. So here there are a couple of pictures how these cohorts look like centurions and so on. You know this picture from here. Of course, apart from infantry, they had also cavalry. That is also of Latin origin. Cavalus, cavallum, it means horse in Latin. Ballista in here, like shooting machines. Actually, this was various war machines like catapults and ballistas allowed them to defeat phalanxes of Hellenistic Greek armies because they're like almost impenetrable. But when you throw a big stone, a huge arrow, like weighing like 50 kilograms, so it would be undefeatable. Castrums, later these military camps that you've seen before in here, sometimes they were on very good strategic positions. Roman didn't intend to leave it, so they built like gradually they gradually built fortifications around and even barracks for legionaries that were actually like what normal garrisons like we know today, but even there were many buildings for officers, administrators, for craftsmen, for wives of veterans, veteran houses around in here. There were merchants, places for hookers, for prostitutes, for example. But it all attracted a lot of people to come, and Romans very often brought, of course, they started to build theaters with Greek dramas. They built hippodromes, stadiums. They start to build which they really love. They start to build spas, baths, municipal baths, and all these attracted people from like many years. So they were actually expanding this antique culture with with their arms, of course, with their weapons. But they were building towns that even today exist, like London. London was Londinium, Parisium was Paris, Vindobona, Vienna. Aquincum, it was Budapest, and very many of these big towns were actually Roman castrums in the past. Still, the remains of Limes Romanus that I'm going to show you are well known in Britain, that there still remains, and you know that there are actually three walls, and that's Hadrian's wall in the northern England, but also there is Trajan's wall in northern England too, Hadrian's and Trajan's wall. Okay, I added also this link, so probably it will be interesting. Yeah, this is also a very short article about actually UNESCO World Heritage Site, because many of the localities in Germany, especially, but including even you see River Rhine, so France probably, and England too. became actually written inscribed in the UNESCO list. So you see Antonine's Wall and Hadrian's Wall in Scotland, but some of them were unfinished. But as you see, some parts in Belgium, Netherlands, Germany, and going even down to like Switzerland. This is in Austria and Slovakia in here. Can come to Hungary, and this is our part, as you can see in this part. So that's why probably some of the walls, some of these limes were also in Africa. And if you remember this Maximianus Maximus of Marcus Aurelius guy and the movie Gladiator, so he was moved somewhere in here to Tunisia to protect some of these fortresses and fortification of Limes Romanus. How it looked like is also reconstructed in many gates and fortifications and watchout towers in here that try to remain. Okay, so that was about UNESCO fortifications. Okay, I have to check before I move to the fall of Roman Republic how much time I leave. Okay, 24 minutes. I think that will be okay. Okay, this crisis appeared to be not actually unsolvable, because when plebeians were given this military thing, so many people realized that it's easy to manipulate with them, and easy if you're a good commander, so legionaries will fight for you, not minding that they can be against republic itself. And that is how republic came to its end and how it fell, and thanks to this guy in the picture called Gaius Julius Caesar. Gaius Julius Caesar, here in reconstructed by many of the busts that remained after him, so there are a couple of versions how it to look like, and with this like funny hat, so somebody would be surprised. He became very popular in Rome, and thanks to very good marriage with his with one widow, he inherited incredible amount of money and farms and slaves. And for that reason, as a rich man in Senate and patrician, he started to build his own legions. Some people who want to seize popularity, so they start to finance building new legions, expanding and conquering new lands, and thus giving these lands to plebeians. So thanks to these investments, they actually get a lot of votes from plebeians, and many of them, just like Gaius Julius Caesar, were elected a tribune of the people. If you remember, tribune of the people was this institute function, or this political function, that he tribune sit in the Senate. He couldn't decide, he could propose any laws, but he was sitting there, and when something he's supposed to be bad for plebeians, he just said and said, veto. I protest, I refuse, and senators, patricians had to change this law. And so this is very good function. And despite he himself was a rich patrician, it doesn't mind. It's actually very good ladder to climb up within the power. This is another version where he also was given a blazer. So yeah, you're one cool Caesar in here. So when you finally have a tribune, and actually a couple of times he was elected a consuls, and before or after this consulate, he realized that his power is based only upon the military, and that's why he organized triumvirate. Let's see also one other. This is another phone. So how would somebody react? I just added. I really love this, not GIF, but picture. You probably know this. Oh my God, cat, and this lemur that is surprised. I believe you've seen it before. Oh yeah. Okay, you know who's the guy in the picture? You know who's the guy in the picture, but I believe I'm not going to be put in a jail like in Belarus or in Russia. Okay, but the point is I need to show you this picture in here. Okay, I believe it will be easier now to spot for you. Okay, I need to move it a bit forward. So give me a moment, guys. Sorry for that. No, this is one step back. I need to switch to animation and posunúť dopredu, I believe. Dozadu, dopredu. No, one step forward. Sometimes it goes on jeden dopredu. Yeah, okay, it should be cool now. Naučite sa, ako sa pracovať aspoň v PowerPointe. Okay, this cat is bad in here. So I'm sorry, I need to move the cat and lemur. Okay, cool guys, and dozadu. Presun dozadu. Toto bude asi úplne blbé teraz, uvidíme. Takže keď sa mi to ešte nahráva. Okay, I need to change it back, but what is in here, I know what to do. I just come back with this and I move these guys here. Okay, so what was the point? Let's do brute. So here, for example, okay, first triumvirate. So the thing was that when he was a consul and a tribune of a people, he realized that he cannot organize everything by himself, and they realized that the republican system is really falling down. So how to rule in republic that is almost democratic but give a lot too much power for some people is to make agreement with other people that have a lot of power just like you, a lot of influence. And this is how so-called triumvirate was established. Triumvirate, again, I'm just blocking my picture in here. So triumvirate, where these three men was Crassus, Magnus Pompeius, or Pompeius Magnus, or the Pompey, and Gaius Julius Caesar. The first triumvirate, which in Latin trium, it means three, and virus, it is men. Yes, it is men. So three men, three viruses, created agreement. They will cooperate in claiming the power, claiming the power for themselves only, and cooperate in the conquest and dividing, sharing the power for themselves. So what happened? They just made agreement. They would influence these things and just go on in their parts. They divided. For example, Crassus, he went to Hispania and he was fighting there for new colonies. Pompeius, or Pompeius Magnus, he went to Greece and to Asia Minor, Mala Asia, where he also expanded and building up his own legions. Gaius Julius Caesar himself, he decided to fight against Gauls who were threatening Roman Republic from the north, and thus he finished the conquest of Cisalpina Gallia, which is northern Italy. He crossed the Alps and started big expansion in Gallia Transalpina, which is over the Alps, Gallia, and actually expansion in France today. And within a couple of years, he managed to conquer not only whole Gallia, whole France, but even a new province of Belgium, which is Belgium, because some of Britons or Bretagne, it's part of France, but Britons, Britannia, named according to Celts living in Britain. So he raised navy and he invaded Britannia and conquered actually what is nowadays all England. So they gave it the name Britannia, which is lands of Britons, but also they tried to expand to Teutonic tribes that they called Germans, Germania. Actually, he didn't succeed in invading Germania. He only built a bridge there, and he rather pulled back and came back to Rome because there were already attempts to get rid of him. The reason was that while he was conquering Gallia, he started to write some parts of the upcoming book that would be kind of like great promotion advertisement for him, and it will be read for generations within 2000 years later on, the Bellic or the Bello Gallico, about the Gallic Wars. It was a book in which he described his invasions, his conquest of Gallia, but there were a couple of tricks that how we can realize that somebody's populist and try to seize the power, was that he was writing this story in the third person. He didn't say that I decided, but Caesar decided. The second thing was that, so when you were reading it, you forgot that the author himself was Caesar. Then the third thing was that he admitted that he committed many of failures, many mistakes. Then Caesar made bad decision with invading these lands. Then he forgot about this stuff. But then eventually So people, like the hero is like us, he's like full of mistakes. He admitted, but then eventually he made like then he got a good idea to do this, and he finally won and prevailed. So happy ending for Romans, and they were happy that okay, that's cool, he's a great hero, and he admitted that he made mistakes, and he is not like so stubborn, so beautiful, self-confident that he wanted to be dictator. So people started to love him, despite he wanted, but it was on purpose. And in this book, it was kind of promo for him, and he started to be adored and loved. Actually, he had to come back to Gallia because, of course, Celts, Gauls didn't like Roman occupation, and veterans were giving lands, and their population was being slaved. So one of the leaders of one of these Gallic tribes called in Vernis, called Vercingetorix in Latin or in Celtic, but in French because he's famous French hero at the same time, Vercingetorix. Vercingetorix or Vercingetorix start to organize big rebellion of all Gallic tribes in Gallia. Before that, they had been fighting. Well, now this time, after like 2 years of Roman occupation, Vercingetorix organized huge uprising that he managed to gather about 200,000 men, including their families, and they start to march all Gallia and banishing Romans from everywhere. So Caesar very quickly had to come back and pick up one legion on the other, put them together. But when he came back to Gallia, still he had only like 10 legions, which is about 60,000 men. It's not enough. So he started to move from one place to another. I will probably show you the pictures later on in the battle of uh, in the Battle of Alesia, and he actually managed to defeat Vercingetorix. I will show you the pictures because on the other slide there are these pictures. But what made them? What was the final thing from this? At the Battle of Alesia, he was able to finish the story and the conquest of Gallia, but that was the biggest thing because the Bello Gallico about the Gallic War persuaded many senators that he's dangerous for the Republic. So they start to persuade Pompeius Magnus and Crassus, but he died soon. He was not important so much. But Pompeius Magnus here in the middle, he they persuaded him that he should actually fight against Caesar, and they elected and they voted, not elected, but they appointed Marcus Magnus to be the dictator of Roman Republic, and actually to imprison Caesar because he was too successful, too popular, that he was dangerous for Republic because he could claim the power and became a tyrant, became a dictator without elections. Because it was not true. Of course, Caesar maybe had these attempts, but he didn't do these steps for that reason. Maybe this Pompeius Magnus was here, and he had supporters in the Senate. So still, Caesar decided to fight, and that's why we talk about the first triumvirate war, because there was first triumvirate, the second triumvirate will be second triumvirate war. It was actually civil war against Crassus and Pompeius, but as I said, Crassus died soon, so it was again Pompeius. And there is also a famous part about crossing the Rubicon. Rubicon is not this Rubik's cube, but it's Rubicon. It's a river that divides. Maybe I can find some map, big map. No, only the beginning. So Rubicon is somewhere in here, somewhere in these parts, and it's a very small river that divided Italia, these Roman territories, from Gallia, because Gallia was already this. Cisalpina, čiže podalpská Galia. Toto je Transalpina Galia, Zaalpská Galia. And this was Rubicon. It was like legendary border of Italia, of Roman territories. And okay, I have to move it all. Sorry for that. Give me a moment. At least we will see how much we passed and how many things I have to tell you before the end. Okay. So what was the point that this crossing the Rubicon River was always like an act of hostility against Romans. So they stopped with his army. He stopped at this Rubicon River and asked his Roman generals and soldiers like, "Shall I really cross Rubicon River? Are you willing to join me?" what shall I do? And they start to cheer and, yeah, let's go, let's cross the river, and cross the river, let's fight Pompeius, and rather give power to you, Caesar, great divine Caesar, than to the Senate that is betraying you. And he claimed, alea jacta est. Alea jacta est means the dice is cast. Dice je kocka, takisto dice je to v množnom čísle. Kocky sú hodené. Ale jak test. You just threw the dice, you cast the dice, you had no chance to come back because crossing the Rubicon, you became the enemy of Rome. You cannot then take it back or persuade Romans that you are not the enemy. You have to go there, kill your enemies, and take power for yourself. You cannot make a compromise in here. So this is interesting. The interesting fact is that it actually never happened. There are no mentions. Later on, legend only were added to many stories. So he didn't ask anybody. Maybe just some of historians, Roman historians, claim that he claimed it and that he said it. Still, while when his armies of 50,000 Roman legionaries entered Italia with great popularity and people were cheering, waving on him, so Pompeius Magnus and Senatus were scared and escaped from Rome. So he actually entered the Rome like the victor. It means winner in Latin, in Roman, and he claimed power for himself. Of course, he restored Senate, but he, of course, installed only his own man. If there are some people who had criticized him, like a very famous politician called Cicero, that you may know him as the poet and great rhetor and philosopher. So he said, you can be here and can criticize me. This was even interesting fact that if you don't want to be like a bad dictator, so you probably should not persecute your rivals, and you should be just better. So if you imprison your opponent, like Navalny in this case, so probably you behave not like Caesar, but like other dictators, not very wise. Some may claim that it's still not true because, how Caesar ended up. What he followed was this triumvirate war. Ended up that he invaded Hispania, these lands of Crassus, but then he followed Pompeius Magnus, who escaped to Greece. So he occupied Greece. Then Pompeius escaped to Anatolia, which they call Asia Minor. Asia Minor znamená Asia Mala. Major by bola veľká. And thus they conquered what is nowadays Turkey. And Pompeius Magnus had last chance. He got on the ship and sailed to Egypt. At the time, Egypt was this Ptolemaic Hellenistic empire under the rule of Ptolemaeus the 14th. But Ptolemaeus the 14th was this big boy, this fat, and he was like boy, like 8 years old boy, and the real power was in the hands of his much older sister called Cleopatra. Her as the last pharaoh of Egypt, and Pompeius Magnus came here. And he believed that they can save him, like they can provide him a shelter, and he had actually no any protectors around. So what Cleopatra did was that she ordered her soldiers to kill Pompeius Magnus and bring his head to Caesar, who was following him. In this way, Romans got to Egypt, and bad for Cleopatra that they became part of kind of empire, because Cleopatra now tried to use her seducing skills to seduce even Caesar, and Caesar brought her to Rome for a visit. They organized a huge parade in Rome. They call it Triumph, which is a big parade with slaves and animals from local countries, and people along the streets were throwing flowers at them and celebrating them and awards. So this kind of military parade, but now Cleopatra like new ally of Rome. Actually, Cleopatra had to come back, but there were rumors that they had she gave birth to Caesar's child, and this is actually motive for a very good series, The Rome, one of the first by History Channel, and really cool one about these things in here. What happened in this way? Caesar, after defeating Pompeius Magnus, he became tribune. At the same time, he became consul, but they didn't elect a second one. And when you have no opponent, political opponent, so what are you? Then he was symbolically proclaimed to be Pontifex Maximus. Už ste možno počuli o slove pontifikát, o pápežoch. Pontifex, it means priest. Pontifex Maximus, it means high or big priest. Maxima znamená veľký, Maximus veľký. Veľký kňaz, najvyšší kňaz, the highest priest of Roman Religion means to be organizing all the religion in Rome, and today later popes adopted pontifex, znamená tiež aj pápež zároveň už dnes. So you organize all the religion, you organize patricians as senators because you represented consuls, and you also represent plebeians as a tribune. And what else? Still, when triumvirate war was on, Rome was in danger, and thus Senate, of course with his own people, or people who were afraid of him. So they proclaimed like you can be a dictator, and because he had a lot of followers in the Senate, so they proclaim and elect him to be lifetime dictator. When somebody claim you to have unlimited power for all your life, you are not consul, you are not tribune anymore. You are dictator. What as we mean it. For Romans, lifetime dictator, it's imperator, because your empire is not in Italia, it's not in Roman speaking, Latin speaking lands. It's from Hispania down to Egypt. It is empire as we know it. In Latin, it's called imperium, and he could be called imperator, but he was not. That's why when we had the end of republic, it's not Rome Caesar. In my opinion, it is the end of republic, but not according to official histories, because he was not called imperator, but his son-in-law, adoptive son, Octavius, he was. What happens? Still, many senators were afraid of him, afraid of his power, because he became tyrant in his way, despite his rule was pretty okay for almost for everybody. So a bunch of them decided to assassinate him. What happened in 44 before Christ? Among him, his nephew Brutus, and that's why also in this picture, see, like looking at him, at two Brute, and you, even you, Brutus, like somebody betrayed you, who was your friend and your family, and you didn't expect him or to be. There are a couple of pictures still to add. You know this picture from your assignment, and it's about conquest of Gallia. Maybe you should read the book. It's like this thick. Every library, town or village library got is Debeli Gallico, Debelo Gallico, o vojne galskej, alebo zápisky o vojne v Galii in Slovak version. Actually, he described it in more like geographical and ethnographical style. He also told something, he talked about their religion, which actually doesn't seem very accurate, and his moves are echoed. These strange arrows are from the period of Vercingetorix uprising, just like these things. What happened, guys? When Vercingetorix organized the 200, maybe 250,000 army of Gauls, Caesar had maximum like 60,000 men. When he saw how the big army, he just retreated, but not away to Italy, but he changed it to other places, and he was gathering new and new legions. So his army grew to almost 100,000 Roman legionaries. Huge, still not as big as they needed, but now this time when Vercingetorix saw this high number of Romans, he was not very confident about his victory. So they start to maneuver within the country, and in this way, Vercingetorix picked up one big hill fort, Oppidum, on the big hill called Alesia, and it was big enough for all the Celts, all the Gauls to be there. But the Romans, when they realized, come on, but it's for themselves, it's a trap. So they used their excellent organizational and architectural skills and auxiliary forces built them two lines of fortification with ditches full of various, is Vercingetorix, full of various traps. I have to show you also this picture with so-called wolf pits, and also with some plants and thorns, obstacles, then some ditches with water, and two palisades with watchout towers. Soldiers were not on the fortification, but only on the watchout towers. When they saw that Celts are attacking, invading on one part of fortification, so they gave like these fire signals, and behind this fortification they quickly built a road, and they could run on this road like about a couple of kilometers and gather and fortify even more of these places along the all fortification. Together it was about like 12 kilometers, even longer, but still they could defend much easily against this stuff. They built it only within 3 days, so Celts were so surprised with this that they started attacking every day and every night, and they couldn't break this fortification. So from their defense, they were actually locked in a trap in this way. When the other day, when these 3 or 4 days passed by very quickly, these 200,000 people in the hill fort completely ran out of any food they had, and they start to eat skin of the trees and dig the earth, and earthworms eat it, but still they had no water. So they opened the gates and released children and women, that Romans may be merciful and let them go. But they didn't, and also they killed them. And these were Romans, bloody, bloodlusting stuff. So they start to negotiate, and Vercingetorix asked, "So what do you wish?" And Caesar said, again, like great statesman, "I release all people, all army. I release only you. I want only you. When you surrender, I'm okay. Everybody can go home." Of course, he was willing to do that, but his co-warriors didn't want to leave it. So Caesar had to promise, and he did. He promised it, that he shall spare his life, which was not true. So in this painting from 19th century, Vercingetorix is surrendering to the proud Caesar in here. But what happened later on? Vercingetorix was imprisoned. He was taken to Rome, and during this triumph, this parade, he was locked in a cage like an animal, and Romans were throwing garbage at him. And finally, at Forum Romanum, he was beheaded. And that was the thing that Romans even added in his memoirs, that he had to do this, but it was only in favor of the people of Rome and peace in Gallia, because next time Gauls never rebelled again, never uprised. And in peaceful way, as Romans saw it, veterans could settle in Gallia, bring Latin culture and Latin language in here, and from Gauls, from Celtic, Welsh, Irish-speaking, British-speaking Gauls, they could turn into Romans, this means Latin-speaking French, which is today. The memories about this actually were the motives for the comic book Asterix Obelix, very famous stories of one and only village, Gallic village, remaining defending against Romans after the Vercingetorix uprising. This is actually first cartoon, first picture from the first episode of the Adventures of Asterix and Obelix, and he started that Vercingetorix is giving up. And you know the stories how Panoramix, the druid, Celtic druid, is making this magic potion with superpower and gave them. But it never ended up. These guys always won, but all these stories ended up like never ended up in this way. What was the real thing, that one day, if they were real, they all died in the end. Panoramix died, they ran out of magic potion, and all their women and children were enslaved. Roman veterans settled in the village, built Roman spa and Roman theater, and make these Gauls speaking actual Latin and French today. So it's very nice story, funny, but it's like, again, like cartoons, fairy tales that are of this, what we call contrafactual history. Okay, couple of stories from Caesar's period. This is somebody's idea how Caesar was crossing the Rubicon River. It was a really small one. This is map of Roman Republic in the year when Caesar uh, was killed. So you see that actually they miss Britannia too, but they have already France, Spain, half of like Tunisia and Libya, Egypt already in here. They conquered also Illyricum, that is Balkans today, with former Yugoslavia, Greece, part of Bulgaria, all Turkey, but also invading to Armenia, Pontus, Cappadocia. At the time, Armenia is very small today, but almost to Caucasian mountains, and against Parthia. Parthia is former Persia, but Persia was too difficult for them, so Romans called them Parthia. And Parthians or Iranians today was the only army that was never defeated by Romans. What else? Okay, this is about the TV series that I recommended for you. Uh, it may contain actually very high rating, as you can see, and there may be some small nudity appearing, but you're old enough, I believe. And it's a story about Caesar and two soldiers of his armies that are kind of like witnesses of events of Caesar. That's him, right? You can see him, and how they try to build a power. And you actually, this is all the war, triumvirate war, and actually ended up with Octavius Augustus coming to the throne. But we're not going to check it out. Okay. anything's in here. Okay, but really, it's one of the oldest first this History Channel series. Better than Spartacus and more for historically fine, as you can see, according to rating. Okay, I think I have another movie. Yeah, Cleopatra, and this is very famous, also 1950s or 60s. 63, 3 years after Spartacus, very famous with Elizabeth Taylor, with Liz Taylor, depicting the stories of, and this from Triumph in Rome as Cleopatra, and seducing not only Gaius Julius Caesar, but even later on Marcus Antonius, that is also important personality from these Triumvirate Wars. So, okay, v pondelí večer. Fine. So this is actually a movie also according to history called Realities that I really like. She was not as beautiful as young Elizabeth Taylor, but with this girl, myth of the beauty is very different. But also sometimes it's important how what do historians write about you? So she was obviously not Nefertiti. Maybe she was very intelligent, beautiful inside, because not very like this. This, for example, picture from also 19th or late 18th century when Pompeius's head was brought in Egypt to Caesar, and he was very unhappy about this. He was very sad that he said that he didn't mean to kill him. Even he was himself was inspired by Alexander the Great that he's not that he wouldn't be the enemy of him. So there's another picture of his assassination, and again, for because of my head, you cannot see it. Okay, I have to check the time if we are not running out of time. A už dávno, 5 minút za decka, sa vám veľmi ospravedlňujem. Takže predpokladám, že už som sa dávno s vami rozlúčil v komentároch a že už 6 minút ideme nad plán. Takže my ideme na ďalšiu hodinu, kde sme mali len pád republiky a ďalšiu hodinu uvidíme, či s praktikantom alebo nie, už pôjdeme na druhú vojnu triumvirátu Octavia Augusta a rímsku ríšu a císarstvo. A aj toto som rád, že ste súhlasili s posunom odovzdania, pretože ešte tam máme čo robiť, máme tam čo prebrať a ešte sa vám to určite zíde. Dobre, takže to je všetko z mojej strany, prajem vám pekný deň, decka, prepáčte za prerušenie, môžete teda utekať na ďalšiu hodinu. Stay positive in mind and negative in tests. Bye bye.